He was the dragon, the ruthless ruler of the city's underworld. Tonight, his father, the true emperor from the east, had come to judge him. The room was frozen in fear. Men worth billions were afraid to breathe. Then she walked in. The shy waitress, the one nobody ever saw. She approached the old emperor, the killer of killers. And when she spoke, it wasn't English. It was a deep, ancient dialect from the rough southern coast of Korea. And with 5 words, she sealed her fate and brought the entire Park Empire to its knees. What did she say?
And who is she?
Stick around. This isn't just a story. It's a blood debt. The restaurant, the palace, was a fortress disguised as heaven. Located on a discreet cobblestone street, its name meant sovereignty, and it treated its clientele as such. Senators dined beside hedge fund titans, and movie stars felt lucky to get a reservation. But the staff, and indeed all of the city, knew who the real sovereign was. Junho Park, the dragon. He owned the building, the block, and half the politicians who ate there. Junho was a man carved from modern granite, wearing a sharp black Mafia suit and a crisp white collared shirt that emphasized his powerful build. His eyes were as cold and dark as the deepest ocean. He was the new generation of power, a Korean mafia boss with a body count. And the palace was his throne room. And then there was Nia. Nia was a ghost in this gilded cage. She was a stunning, 25-year-old African woman, possessing a beauty that she tried desperately to hide. Her uniform was immaculate, a flowing white dress cinched with a red vest, and her hair was pulled back severely. She was the definition of the shy waitress, a background detail in a world of blinding power. She needed this job. The anonymity was her shield. The money, which was excellent, was her escape fund. Tonight, the air in the palace wasn't just tense, it was vibrating. The kitchen was silent, save for the sharp clack of knives. The manager, a perpetually stressed man named Robert, looked pale enough to faint. Even Junho, the Korean mafia boss, who was holding court at his usual table, the one with a clear view of both entrances and a reinforced wall behind it, seemed on edge. He was waiting for his father. Chairman Min-suk Park was not a man. He was a legend, a myth from the old country. He was the supreme leader, a figure of such archaic and brutal power that even his own son, the terrifying Korean mafia boss of the city, was still just a child in his shadow. He had not set foot on American soil in 20 years. His arrival was not a social call. It was an inspection, an audit of blood and loyalty. "You," Robert snapped, his finger jabbing at Nia. "The private dining room, table 7 tonight." Nia's blood ran cold. The private room? That was reserved for Junho's most sensitive meetings. She had actively avoided it for a year. "Me?" "But Robert, I thought Maya was." "Maya," Robert hissed, "spilled a drop of wine near Mr. Park's cousin last week. She's cleaning glasses in the basement. You are quiet. You are fast. You do not exist. Do you understand me? You are a pair of hands. Nothing more. Go." Nia swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded, her hands trembling so hard she had to clench them behind her back. At 9 p.m., they arrived. The front doors of the palace were closed to the public. Junho Park stood at the entrance, a posture of respect he showed for no one else. 2 black sedans, models that looked more armored than civilian, glided to the curb. Chairman Min-suk Park emerged. He was shorter than his son, perhaps in his late 70s, but he seemed to take up more space. He wore a dark, heavy-wool suit that had been fashionable decades ago. His face was a map of hardship and old-world suspicion, dominated by eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the light. He didn't walk, he glided, his hand resting on a simple gnarled wooden cane. Beside Junho were his top lieutenants. Sangwoo, the snake, a slim, smiling advisor who never blinked, and Daeshik, a man who looked like he'd been built out of spare boulders. They were a portrait of modern mafia power. Chairman Park ignored them all. He walked past his son, giving him only a curt nod, and entered the restaurant. He didn't look at the priceless art or the crystal chandeliers. He simply sniffed the air, as if tasting the restaurant's legitimacy. "He's in a room," Robert whispered to Nia, shoving a silver tray into her hands. "Water, still. No ice, and do not speak unless spoken to." Nia's heart hammered against her ribs. She balanced the tray, the crystal glasses rattling softly. She pushed open the heavy oak door to the private room. The air was thick with smoke and testosterone. Chairman Park was seated at the head of the long table. Junho sat to his right, looking like a prince begging for approval. Sangwoo and Daeshik flanked them. Nia moved to the table, her eyes locked on the polished wood. She poured the water for the chairman first. Her hand was steady, a small miracle. She moved to pour for Junho. "So," Chairman Park said, his voice a low rumble like gravel in a tomb. He wasn't speaking English. He wasn't even speaking proper standard Korean. He was speaking a deep, guttural, countryside dialect, one inflected with the rough history of the coast. He gestured dismissively at the opulent room. "All this. It is yours."
Juno stiffened.
He replied in a cleaner, more academic version of the language, his American accent detectable. "Yes, father. I built it for the family." The chairman's lip curled in a tiny, almost imperceptible sneer. He hated the clean, standard tongue. It was the language of the politicians who stole from them. It was not the language of their people. "You built this," the chairman said in the dialect, "with American money. It is soft, like you." Junho's face tightened. "The times are different, father." "The times do not change," the chairman grunted. "Men do. They become weak." He turned his gaze to his son's lieutenants. "You surround yourself with children." Sangwoo, the snake, smiled his oily smile. "With respect, Chairman Park. Our reach is global. We have interests in." Chairman Park held up a single liver-spotted hand. Silence fell. He had not given Sangwoo permission to speak. The advisor's blood drained from his face. The chairman looked around the table. He seemed deeply, profoundly disappointed. He felt alien, surrounded by men who had forgotten their roots. He pushed his water glass away in disgust. "Water," he muttered in the dialect. Like a child. He looked up, his black eyes landing on Nia as she stood by the wall, waiting to be dismissed. He saw her only as a piece of furniture, contrasting sharply with the environment in her white dress and red vest. He barked at her, not at his son.
"Wine. Red.
One that tastes of the earth, not of smoke and chemicals." Immediately, Nia froze. This was the moment, the pivot point of her entire life. She was supposed to nod, terrified, and fetch Robert. She was supposed to be invisible. But the words he spoke, they were the language of her grandmother, the language of her childhood nightmares and her secret lullabies, the language she hadn't spoken aloud in a decade. Junho, embarrassed, began to translate. "He wants wine. Red. I heard him," Nia said. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the cigar smoke like a razor. Junho's head snapped toward her. Sangwoo and Daeshik stared. Nia took one step forward, away from the wall. She was no longer a ghost. She looked directly into the black, merciless eyes of Chairman Min-suk Park. She dipped her head not in a servile bow, but in a gesture of ancient, formal respect. And then, in the same pure, low, rough dialect that the chairman himself had used, she replied. "Good day, Chairman Park." The effect was instantaneous. It was as if a grenade had been rolled silently onto the table. If Nia had pulled a gun, the reaction could not have been more immediate. Daeshik, the muscle, actually flinched, his hand dropping to the weapon beneath his jacket. Sangwoo's slick smile vanished, replaced by a mask of pure shock, his mouth hanging open slightly. Junho, the powerful Korean Mafia boss, went pale. His disbelief was absolute. He looked at Nia as if she had suddenly grown a second head. He stared at this shy waitress, this African woman in a white dress and red vest whom he'd barely registered as human, this creature who cleaned his crumbs and heard the impossible. It wasn't just that she spoke the dialect. It was how she spoke it. She didn't speak with the clumsy, hesitant tongue of a student. She spoke it with the terror and the earth that the chairman had just demanded. Her pronunciation was flawless, invoking the narrow, sun-baked coastal villages, the salt of the sea, the blood in the soil. It was a language of secrets, one meant to exclude the outside world, and she spoke it like she was born to it. But it was Chairman Park's reaction that held the room in a vice. The old man had not moved a muscle, but his eyes, which had been dull with disdain, suddenly ignited. They became sharp, focused, and lethal. He stared at Nia, his gaze so intense it was a physical weight, pinning her to the spot. Nia's heart was a trapped bird against her ribs. But she held his gaze. She had stepped off the cliff. There was no going back. She continued in the dialect, her voice steady, respectful, but infused with a strength that belied her trembling hands. "My name is Nia. It is a true honor to serve you tonight." She then added the line that shattered the silence. "I remember the wine that a man of respect likes. A wine from the old earth, one that has not abandoned its roots." It was a direct, breathtaking echo of the chairman's own complaint. She hadn't just understood him. She had agreed with him, and in doing so, had subtly validated his disgust with the soft American room. Junho, fluent in business Korean but a clumsy tourist in his father's dialect, understood enough to know he had just been insulted by his own waitress, and worse, his father had just been flattered by her. "What the hell is this?" Junho snapped in English, his voice a low growl. "Nia, get out." Nia didn't look at him. Her focus was absolute. It was only on the chairman. Chairman Park raised a single wrinkled finger, silencing his son without a glance. Junho's jaw clamped shut, a muscle twitching in his cheek. He had been publicly overridden. The old chairman leaned forward. The silence in the room was so deep Nia could hear the fizz of the candle wicks. He spoke, his voice softer now, but infinitely more dangerous.
"You."
Little 1 inch he studied her face, his eyes narrowing. "Where do you come from?"
"Who taught you to speak like that?"
"This is not the tongue of a waitress. And certainly not one who looks like you." He was testing her. He was asking for her lineage, her city, her family. In their world, this was the only question that mattered. Nia knew she was walking a tightrope over a canyon. She had to give him an answer that was both true and a lie. "I come from here, Chairman," she replied in the dialect. "But my grandmother was from the southern coast. She never spoke a word of English to me. She said the old words had more power. She taught me to respect the men who, like the wine, have not abandoned their roots." The southern coast. The mention hung in the air, thick with a history of blood and iron. It was a place of respect, a heartland of the old ways. The chairman's expression was unreadable. He saw her simple uniform, her clean, unadorned face, and the blazing, terrified intelligence in her eyes. He saw a contradiction that fascinated him. Sangwoo, recovering his composure, decided to intervene. He saw a potential threat, an unknown variable. "Chairman," Sangwoo said, attempting the dialect and failing, his voice sounding thin and weak after Nia's. "She is a servant. She is playing a game. Perhaps she learned a few phrases too." Silence. The chairman roared. The word cracked like a whip. Sangwoo flinched as if struck. Chairman Park's eyes never left Nia. He saw the subtle contempt in her expression as she glanced at Sangwoo. The contempt of a true speaker for a fraud. A slow smile spread across the old